It's me again, and I've been wondering, what was it like back in the 90s? Since obviously I wasn't there, I've hired a mad scientist to send me 32 years into the past. He should be arriving any minute now. Well, they had Sonic 2. 1992 was a big year for Sonic the Hedgehog, what with Sonic 2 getting a release date and the brand's quick expansion into other media. Things were moving fast, almost as fast as Sonic himself. And one of the first excursions into media outside of video games was the Sonic the Hedgehog manga, released only in Japan. This manga, however it's pronounced, was mostly based on the early concepts of Sonic's backstory, and it's extremely bizarre to read now. I'm not going to go any further into this one because 1, I don't know Japanese, and 2, I'm not willing to learn. No. If there's one language I'm gonna learn, it's Italian. And if there's one place I'm gonna go, it's Italy. The arcade is a close second. Sonic's arcade exploits continue with Segasonic Bros. Or at least they would have if this game wasn't cancelled. Yeah, at some point, some nerd somewhere uncovered the remnants of this unreleased arcade game that was extremely similar to Sonic Eraser, just with more interesting mechanics and less ear bleeding. I'd love to play it myself, but that covers the little releases of 1992, but the one everyone was really looking forward to was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But first, let's talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. If you happen to live in Europe or any other region using PAL TVs back in November of 1992, first of all, why? Second of all, the Master System version of Sonic 2 released up to an entire week before the proper Genesis release, depending on which country you were in. Some people just have all the luck. So technically, the Master System version was released before the normal game. It was also only released in PAL regions, so everywhere except the US. Oh, come on! Now, normal regions, like America and Japan, got both the Game Gear version and the Genesis version on the same day, which is pretty strange when most portable backports release several months or years after their original counterpart. Heck, Sonic 1's backport took 3.5 months after release, so the fact that Sonic 2 released day and date with the backport is pretty cool. In America, they even proclaimed the release day of the game Sonic Tuesday. Hello? Pun police? Yeah, have you got a time machine? Unlike Sonic 1, where the backport shared some zones and was generally pretty similar to its Genesis version, Sonic 2 decided to be weird. First of all, Sonic is alone, despite the whole point of Sonic 2 being that there is a second player. The plot of Sonic 2 on Game Gear is that Eggman has kidnapped Tails and you gotta go save him. You are also legally required to suffer. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Game Gear is notorious for being one of the hardest and most bullcrap games in the series. First of all, the overly restrictive field of view is now even worse because the developers made Sonic take up more of the screen. Great. While this game is nice enough to re-implement the ring crutch as it should, the game lacks any checkpoints or shields, which is just completely baffling to me. Did they run out of space on the cartridge and go, nah, our customers are gamers, they'll be fine without them? The first zone is full of lava and spikes, and the only thing worse than that is the rammer. Underground zone. Yes, that's 2 words. Lava, spikes, breakable walls, and the gimmick of minecarts, which are yet another excuse to yell about the small screen size. Half of these things dump you directly into lava or spikes, and the other half you need to jump out of at the right time or risk missing a Chaos Emerald. I just don't understand why this was the first zone. Like, come on, man, this is just Marble Zone on crack. Yep, pretty accurate. The boss of this area is this weird antlion thing that summons bouncy balls. Since, like the first game, you have no rings in boss fights, this annoying arthropod made me want to bash my head into a wall until I get another stupid idea that I'll spend unholy amounts of time working on. The next area is Sky High Zone, and that makes the second time I brought this up. It won't be the last. The opening card of this zone shows exactly what to expect from the game as a whole. These hang gliders show us that it'll have weird but maybe fun gimmicks, and Tails' lack of his two tails tell us that somebody forgot to care. This is another pretty perilous zone, but this time it's all about vertical platforming, giant spike pits, thunderstorms, and hang gliders. The gliders are not really that bad, and the zone as a whole is only really that difficult because you can't see where you're going. The boss is a giant goose head in the clouds. Peace was never an option. And now we have the sequel to Labyrinth Zone that nobody asked for nor wanted. Aqua Lake! More platforming on a tiny screen with sluggish controls, the threat of drowning, and controllable air bubbles that are also really slow. I'm not elaborating, it sucks. The boss fight is pretty fun though. It's a sea lion that blows up an exploding red ball and can only be attacked while he's in the middle of preparing his attack. Because if you hit him while he hasn't got a ball on his nose, he'll bounce Sonic on it and fling him off to the left. This is cool. I like this. On to the next zone, which is... Am I reading this right? Green Hills Zone? How is Sonic 2 a real game? This zone is extremely simple and straightforward. It's pretty much just Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1, but with different trees. Why on earth was this not the first zone? Nobody knows, and apparently the hills, plural, in Green Hills is a mistranslation of the Japanese word for hill, singular. We almost had two completely different zones named the exact same thing. The boss of this area is a big sumo wrestler pig. He's a pushover. I don't think the pun police have picked up on the punchline yet. Gimmick Mountain is the next zone, and whoever named this thing was a genius because that perfectly describes this area. It's a mountain of random tech junk that's mostly full of annoying gimmicks. Sounds like my closet. It's extremely maze-like and has a whole lot of those minecarts from Underground Zone, gears, and so many spikes. The boss here is not very difficult at all, just a boar that charges straight at you and rams its head into the wall. There seems to be a pattern of really easy bosses being offset by not having any rings. The next zone is Scrambled Egg. This breakfast classic is made out of fresh egg and milk. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong scrambled egg. This zone is set in a dark cavern Eggman has taken control of. It's full of big pipes that drop you directly into bigger spikes. It's a difficult zone, and its boss is Mecha-Sonic. Yep, this is what Sonic Mania was referencing with those little guys. The final zone is only accessible if you collected all 6 of the Chaos Emeralds beforehand. And yep, they're in weird, hard-to-find spots again. Good luck. Now, if you didn't get all of the emeralds, which is much more likely to happen with how bloody difficult this game is, the ending is that Sonic failed and Tails is now dead. I am not even kidding. Like all classic Sonic games though, the canonical ending is that Sonic finds all the emeralds and saves the day good and proper. Once he's got the emeralds, he gets to go through this flashy zone called Crystal Egg and take on the true final boss that is a bigger pushover than my miniatures. Well, that's Sonic 2 on the Game Gear. I've already explained how the short-sightedness is a really big problem, but the order of the zones and all the hiding places of the Chaos Emeralds are almost as bad. Thankfully, we can move on to the real Sonic 2 now on the Genesis. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This one introduces Tails as a player too, and the advent of 2-act zones. This definitely makes Sonic 2 more varied and interesting, since instead of having 6 zones with 3 acts each, there are now 11 zones, most of which have 2 acts each. Which means I can't use my fingers to count which zone we're on. Dang it! First up, Emerald Hill! It's just Green Hill Zone with some bells and whistles. It's got different textures, sure, and all the different badniks and stuff, but come on, this is just the Green Hill of Sonic 2. Now, the checkpoints in Sonic 2 serve a dual purpose now. They are both checkpoints and your entrance to special stages. This means you can get more than one chance at an emerald per level if you tread carefully. And this is a very good change that I immensely appreciate. Especially now that the reward for getting all 7 of the emeralds is more than just a better ending. You get the ability to go Supersonic, which is quite obviously a play on Super Saiyan from Dragon Ball, but we don't really watch anime on this channel, so we're going to ignore that. But hey, did you catch that? There's 7 Chaos Emeralds now. This will go on to cause mass confusion among Sonic fans for the next 30 years. The boss fight in Emerald Hill is Eggman's drill machine thing. It's really easy. On to Chemical Plant! This is a pretty well-known zone, returning almost as often as Green Hill. It's got a lot going for it. Interesting obstacles, cool ramps and loops, pipe gaming, and water sections. 0 out of 10, the stage has water. The boss for this zone is simple, but a decent challenge with these platforms that flip down, adding an extra danger to the fight.
The next zone is Aquatic Ruin, which is the game's proper water level.
I'd usually bring up any water as a negative thing to hold against the stage, but this one designs around letting the player avoid the water completely if they're good enough at the game, which is immensely cool and adds further incentive to get good and stay on the higher paths. The boss of this stage used to really confuse me as a kid, and I don't understand why. It's just climbing these totems while avoiding slow-moving arrows to hit Eggman a couple times. Simple, but a fun idea to add some variation to the bosses by it being about how to hit him in the first place, instead of being about how to not get hit while hitting him.
Casino Night is the next zone up, and it's kind of an evolution of Spring Yard Zone from Sonic 1. But instead of telling you to cope, this one tells you to gamble.
Springs, bumpers, flippers, slot machines, and a boss fight that is essentially a challenge of pinball skills. Foreshadowing. Hilltop Zone is the area after the casino, and it's got an absolute tune for background music. It's full of seesaws, ropes, lava, and blue mountains. The boss is pretty much an upgraded version of the boss from Marble Zone, which is pretty cool.
Then Sonic falls down a big hole and lands in the Mystic Cave. This isn't the Hobbit!
Mystic Cave Zone is fine. I don't really have much to say. There's falling spikes, vines, levers, some interesting badniks. Oh yeah, it's also got this massive pit of spikes that is completely inescapable even if you have Supersonic. Ha! The boss is Eggman getting smart and using a drill for what a drill is supposed to be used for. Breaking rocks. It's a somewhat challenging boss and is alright in my book.
Oh hey, did you see the news? They had another oil spill down south. They're saying it's practically its own ocean at this point.
Oil Ocean. Don't go fishing in this one.
Aw, dang it.
It's got obstacles in spades, such as the fans back from Starlight Zone, these ventilation caps that will absolutely insta-kill you if you're playing like a moron. It's also got the oil the zone is named after that will also insta-kill you if you're playing like a moron, and there's a bunch of spikes and badniks everywhere as well. It's a perilous journey, but the end is ironically the easiest part, with the boss fight being extremely simple to take down, if a bit slow.
At last we come to the final gauntlet of zones, starting with Metropolis Zone, which is not modeled after New York or Chicago like you would expect. It's modeled after Detroit.
This is the obligatory machine-filled wasteland zone of the game, and it's got gears, exploding starfish, and a whole lot of spiky objects. It's not a very interesting zone, to be honest, which is why I'm all the more confused at the fact that this is the only zone in the game to have 3 acts.
Why?
This is the least fun zone in the game. Why is it also the longest? At least the boss is trivial. After beating Eggman's latest joke of a boss fight, Sonic and Tails hop on their biplane and begin Sky Chase Zone, which is the most unique of the bunch. You have pretty limited movement with having to stay on top of the biplane, but you've also got to take out all these badniks that are floating menacingly towards you. Now, despite it technically being an auto-scroller, I like it, and it's got a nice calm track to listen to as you float upwards and onwards to Eggman's base in the sky.
Wing Fortress is the final real zone of the game, and it's a pretty wild ride. Unless you collected all of the Chaos Emeralds before now, in which case it's actually just a power fantasy, which makes all the gem collecting worth it.
I really love this zone, and I'm glad it didn't become one of those that Sega would bring back constantly for fan service points. The boss fight is a somewhat difficult encounter with a ceiling eye. It's got lasers and spiky platforms, not much else to say here. Then there's the finale at Death Egg Zone, which again does not give you any rings. I hope you've been stocking up extra lives.
This isn't much of a zone, it's really just an arena for fighting the 2 final bosses, Megasonic and the Death Egg Robot. If you die at the end of the Death Egg Robot, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, and that is 2 hours of my life I am never going to get back.
These are both hard as nails, and you only get one hit to take out both of them. This is insanity, but if you push through and take down the Eggman, you'll be treated to the ending and credit sequence, finishing off our adventures on West Side Island.
And with that, we've finished everything 1992 has to offer. And you know, I'm starting to really appreciate that I live in the present day. They did not have Team Fortress 2 in 1990.